Start, bench, cut these 3 Penn State running backs in college. Can you tell me who Penn State football is playing this weekend?
Sorry, what?
Welcome back into the Penn State Pulse. I'm your host, Dylan Dawson. Penn State put a fairly sloppy performance on tape Saturday night, but still came away with their first ranked win on the young season, topping number 19 Illinois by the score of 21-7. So let's jump into this thing as usual with the things that stood out to me first. Tom Allen's adjustments were very big in this game. Don't think I didn't see y'all in my comments calling for Tom Allen's head after that opening drive by Illinois. No one's safe around here. I see everything. But after going with a pretty vanilla defense on that opening drive, Tom Allen did what he's done through all 4 games now and made the necessary adjustments. I'm going to read something off to you guys, and this stat is very telling of said adjustments that this defense has made. Through 4 games now, Penn State has allowed 9 total points in the second half of their contest. 9. That is very impressive. That defensive line in particular is finally beginning to flash their elite potential, as they turned it up a notch in their first against their first conference foe of the season. They ended up tallying 13 tackles for loss and 7 sacks against Illinois. That's very impressive, especially compared to what they were putting up numbers-wise through the first 3 games of the season. So that kind of leads me into my next point, which is that Penn State might actually be truly elite in the trenches. Not really sure how it's possible, but after losing a ton of talent along both lines to the NFL, Penn State may actually be even better in the trenches this season. Illinois is a big, tough team, and the Nittany Lions simply pushed them around all night long. Look no further than the rushing stats to prove this, as Penn State ran for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns and held Illinois to 34 yards and 0 touchdowns on 32 carries. That comes out to 1.1 yards per carry for the Fighting Illini. I went with Abdul Carter as my Nittany line of the game, and for good reason, as he put up a ridiculous stat line of 8 pressures, 7 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, and 1 pass defensed. He wasn't the only one on that front 7 that dominated though, so let me give credit where credit is due. My guy Zane Durant out there on the interior, he put up 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. Those numbers don't even tell the whole story though, as he was just manhandling the interior of that Illinois offensive line all game long. Kobe King at linebacker also put together another great performance. He's having an awesome year in the Mike position. He put up 7 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a sack of his own. On the opposite side of the ball, Drew Shelton. He seems to be showing some improvement with run blocking in particular. Venga Ioane and Nick Dawkins have been honestly pretty elite on the interior, both living up to their preseason hype and then some. Coach Franklin actually praised Dawkins in particular in his Monday presser, saying, quote, "We had high expectations for him, but I actually think he's playing better than we anticipated." And then finally, I can't talk about the offensive line without highlighting Anthony Donko. We haven't heard his name very much at all this season, which is quite a good thing when talking about an offensive lineman. He has been absolutely holding it down over there at right tackle, and I think he'll be able to hang with the best of the best edge rushers in the Big Ten and honestly around the country. So next up, I have to highlight this 2-headed monster at running back. We've heard it a million times for going on 3 years now, but there's no sign of stopping Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton. I know I already mentioned the run game, but that was more about crediting the offensive line, so these running backs need their flowers as well. Singleton and Allen once again each put up great performances in the same game, both averaging nearly 6 yards per carry against a very stout Illinois run defense. Kaytron went for 102 yards and a touchdown on 18 carries, while Nick went for 94 and a tutty on 16 carries. These 2 backs, paired with an offensive line that's becoming increasingly dominant in run blocking, is a unit that can do some serious damage in this conference. They just took over the game on Saturday night and showed us a bullying, rough around the edges personality that we haven't quite seen to that extent in past Penn State teams in past years. So let's jump into some areas for improvement. Just gave you guys a bunch of good for you to sit on, so let's talk about some of the bad. The first thing that needs to be addressed is obviously the kicking game. Xander Sahaydak went 0 for 2 on the day, missing both from 40 yards out. That simply can't happen when the competition increases and every point matters that much more. Xander is now 3 for 9 in his career at Penn State and 1 for 6 from 30 plus yards out. I get that you need to trust your kicker and give him enough opportunities, but I'd say that this experiment should be coming to an end. He's had plenty of them. Sahaydak just can't string together consistent performances, and Penn State does not have the time to sit around and hope that it just works out. I really think they need to make a change here. If you guys recall my preseason, it was like a breakout player episode where I picked a player at every position. I was calling for walk-on Ryan Barker to possibly start. That hasn't come to fruition yet. As far as the kicking game, Penn State did send him out there after their final touchdown last Saturday for the extra point, which he did make. So if they do indeed make a change at place kicker, it's going to be either Barker or Tulsa transfer Chase Meyer. Meyer was able to go 17 for 20 last season at Tulsa, and that included a nearly perfect 7 for 8 from 30 to 39 yards out and 3 for 5 from 40 plus yards. Not too bad. Much better than what they're putting on the field right now. PSU needs to make a change at kicker before they're going up against the likes of USC, Wisconsin, and Ohio State, which are all in a row, by the way. Make the change, James. It's time. Finish your drives. This is another issue. Ties a lot into my last point with the kicking game, but Penn State will need to find a way to finish drives with points at a higher clip than they did against the Fighting Illini. PSU had 374 yards and nearly 34 minutes of time of possession Saturday night, but only 21 points to show for it. The issues with the field goal kicking is absolutely the big factor here, but I also thought Andy Kotelnicki made a few poor decisions when Penn State's offense would get down around the red zone. Although the run game was working, I think he leaned on that a little too much toward the end of drives. Illinois was in that press man coverage for the majority of the night as expected, so I was hoping to see more play action leading into crossers and mesh concepts, especially when they were closing in on points down there in the red zone. And then finally, I need to hit on the lack of discipline. We've never really seen these sort of things become an issue to the extent that they have this season under James Franklin. Penn State has some major penalty issues, and they have not gone away through 4 games. It's typical for teams to have some sloppy mistakes through the first few weeks of the season as they gel and become more comfortable with their schemes, but PSU can't seem to wrangle them in. The big one on Saturday night was on the would-be pick 6 by A.J. Harris that was called back by a very unnecessary block in the back on Zion Tracy. I know it's much harder to make a decision like that in real time, but Harris was on his way to the end zone regardless. It's just something you can't really do in a situation like that. And I want to reiterate that just like the missed field goals, a play like that can change the entire course of a game against an opponent like Ohio State. Most of the Nittany Lions penalties, though, have been pre- and post-snap ones, which is just as frustrating. The defense has consistently had probably 3 or 4 offsides in every game this season now. They probably had like 5 against West Virginia. But there's been an excessive amount of unnecessary roughness penalties as well. All of this can still be cleaned up, but again, those changes are going to have to come very soon. So that is going to do it for today's episode of the Penn State Pulse. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see y'all in a few days to break down Penn State's Saturday matchup with the UCLA Bruins.